welcome everybody. Come in and find a seat as close as possible. All right, we're pleased to have you here, and we're pleased to welcome you to the 6th iteration of a program on Indigenous ways of being. I want you to put away all your devices, computers and cell phones, and give your full attention up here, turn them off, and stow them a little bit. And also, before we get started, writing is good. So if you want to pull out a pen and paper to take notes, write down quotes, things that you hear that you want to carry with you, that is all good. I want to thank Kaya Matra, Director of the Humanities Program, Kent Thompson, Jazzy and Evan, and Eva Herrick-Bears, my Humanities 214 counterpart, for helping and making this program happen. I'm Leslie Johnson, Coordinator for Humanities 124. So as I said, this is the 6th program and conversation we've had on Indigenous ways of being, and it's a joint effort between Humanities 124, Ancient Worlds, and Humanities 214, Pre-Modern Worlds, and it centers Indigenous voices, experiences, and perspectives. In Humanities 124, we read transcriptions of several Eastern Band Cherokee stories. Now, reading spoken word is better than not hearing these stories at all, but it's a makeshift way to experience a rich oral tradition which has held and carried these stories for tens of thousands of years. So we are fortunate today to have with us Nancy Pheasant, a renowned storyteller, and Shennelle Feather, manager of education programming at the Museum of the Cherokee People. Both are enrolled members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee, or the Anagadua, and they're here to bring understanding, life, and breath to these oral histories. Through the act of storytelling across generations, these oral histories communicate important ideas, scientific truths, social protocols, politics, ethics, and metaphysics, grounded in timeless relationships between humans and the non-human world, not as separate, but as part and partner of survival. Scholars and scientists today are now acknowledging how native science and technology reveals methods that in the past and in the future mitigate climate change. It could be that Indigenous storytellers and oral historians are bearing knowledge we cannot live without. Humanities 124 begins the semester with a land acknowledgement UNCA crafted in collaboration with the Eastern Band that acknowledges that the university itself occupies land stolen from the Anagadua. These words alone don't do justice to the relationship and responsibility unless the university also makes space and gives a real place to Indigenous people's voices, rights, and concerns. This program is a very small effort within a bigger movement. So please give your whole self to listening and ask yourself what you will do with these stories and the knowledge they bring once you've received it. There will be time for question and answer after the conversation, but for now, I will get out of the way and hand it over to Nancy and Shennelle. Let's give them a round of applause.
Shio. Can you say Shio? Awesome. You guys just learned a Cherokee word. That means hello. So Shio, Oshanale, which is good morning, and Galiele Zeto. I'm happy that I'm here. Zanela Ugitafli Dagwado. My name is Shennelle Feather, and I am from Cherokee. I represent the, my first clan is Todachini, which is from the Navajo Nation, and it means bitter water. And that's my mother's clan, and her mother's clan, and her mother's clan, all the way to the beginning of us. And my father is Ani Kahui, which is the Deer clan from the Cherokee people, the Eastern Band Cherokee of these mountains. And I grew up, was born and raised on the Koala boundary. And I'm happy to be able to just have this conversation today. I'm glad you guys are all here, and you look like you're ready to absorb things. So this is going to be a good talk. This is about my third or fourth year coming over here and presenting just, life from my perspective as a Cherokee / Navajo Indigenous woman, and I'm just really, really happy to do this type of work. And yeah, so just wanted to introduce myself a little bit, and I'll have Nancy introduce herself as well.
Shionagad. Anashi Tandisti Dagwado. Hello, my name is Nancy Pheasant. I, like Shennelle, have grown up on the Qualla boundary in Cherokee, North Carolina. Also, like Shennelle, she has dual Native Indian tribe, if you want to call it that. I am also a dual Native. On my mother's side, I am Cherokee as well as Potawatomi. On my father's side, I am, he was a full-blood Cherokee. So when it comes to our enrollment or our membership in a Native tribe, we get to pick and choose, literally. We cannot hold a dual enrollment in two different tribes. So my first tribe is, of course, Cherokee. I have more Cherokee in myself than I do Potawatomi, but Potawatomi is also known as another Iroquoian tribe. So when I do storytelling, I draw from both cultures. I draw from my Cherokee culture as well as the Potawatomi culture. So, and you'll hear a little bit of mixing when I do some stories and things of that nature. But like Shennelle, this is my third year coming and doing the same type of lecture for the Humanities and English department here at UNCA, and I always look forward to it. You guys are always so receptive of us, so I really do appreciate it. And I'll just turn it back over to Shennelle, and I'll let her get started because I know she does a really good presentation on the differences and why we are moving from calling our stories legends or stories themselves into more of an oral history. So I'll let her take it away with that.
Shki. Well, funny that she brought up dual. She's two different Native tribes. I'm actually three different Native tribes. So I'm a Indigenous Mutt a little bit. I'm also Lakota. And she's right. You can't hold dual citizenship, dual membership in multiple tribal nations. So whenever I was born, I was actually enrolled member of the Navajo Nation because I am half Navajo. So I'm more Navajo than I am, or Dene is what we call ourselves, but most commonly known as Navajo. And I'm still trying to flip my brain to make sure that I always say Dene, because if you were to ever meet my grandpa, who is a fluent Dene speaker, and my grandmother, who are fluent Dene speakers, they literally had to teach themselves English through like watching TV and like copying. I would see my grandmother copying the newspaper and just like words and just writing it. And that they're still alive. They're in their 80s and they speak broken English. And I get to see them, visit them, and they'll tell me stories, and it's really cool, or histories, right? Their histories, and it's really cool to be able to still connect with them and hear them. And I'm so thankful that I have both of them still here on that side, very rich in culture. And then I have a grandmother on my dad's side still here with us. And it's interesting because to have the differences of nations represented, and whenever I visit with them, you can totally see how Manifest Destiny affected Indigenous people through the eradication of culture and language, right? Because my Cherokee grandma, my Eastern Band Cherokee, she always spoke English. She never spoke Cherokee, even though her mother was a fluent Cherokee speaker, a honeysuckle basket maker, a herbalist, and her father was a full-blooded Lakota man from South Dakota, from Rosebud, and he spoke Lakota, and she spoke English. And is very, worked hard her whole life, went to school till she was 13 or 14, grew up in Tennessee actually, and then moved back home after my grandfather passed away, my great-grandfather passed away, and then, made her life there. But she can tell me about how she grew up and became a police officer, the first female police officer on the force and on Kuala Boundary. She'll tell me things like that. But then my grandparents on my other side, they didn't have running water, and they lived in a hogan, and they really didn't even go to school. They were out in the desert, in the canyons, learning how to rug weave. My grandmother and my grandfather, he comes from a line of Hashkinini. He's royalty. His dad, his grandfather was royalty, and he actually led a group of Dene people into the canyon during the long walk, and taught that they were the ones that flourished during that time. They learned how to live off the land. They multiplied. They had all the turquoise. They learned how to do turquoise during that time, and they had the most sheep. So they came out of there like the richest Navajos during that time, which is wild to think about because every indigenous nation has been relocated in some way by the United States government. And so you don't hear about the long walk as much as you hear about the Trail of Tears. But every indigenous nation was relocated from their ancestral homelands. That's the uniqueness about Eastern Band, is that we have stood here, we have stayed here. And assimilation actually was the name of the game for us. But this shift, so all of those things play into, these are real things. They really happened. I have the direct connection to be able to speak to these histories, to hear them with my grandparents. You all do too, right? And so to talk about storytelling as with Indigenous people as just stories or legends, we're even like having to shift our brains to think of it as oral histories or oral herstories, right? And so I had a conversation one time. We invited Miss Kathy Littlejohn over to the museum to speak with my workers, my team, to help talk about Kuwohi and the history of Kuwohi, which was most commonly known as Klingman's Dome, which maybe you guys have heard about it. Recently, the name was changed to Kuwohi, and just this past Friday, I think, we got signs up there. We have signage now with our syllabary. So we have phonetics Kuwohi and then syllabary Kuwohi. And it's really cool to see that recognition happening and how much the national park is really, really Great Smoky Mountain National Park. We are really good partners with them. It's like kind of scary what's happening right now, but with the National Park Service, they have really fully supported and embraced that change. And we know that there are a lot of people who don't support it, but even if that isn't supported, we as EBCI, we still call it Kuwohi, and we still know what history happened there. We still know that we were, our clan system was there and given to us, and that was passed down. That's a history that was passed down orally to us to be able to carry, and we still call it Kuwohi or Kuwahi. So we know those things, and it's embedded in our DNA. It's embedded in how we wake up every morning in our ancestral homeland, and how we can feel that flowing through our nervous systems, and how we connect with each other. So it's not just stories. To me, that demeans it. That takes away the significance of who we are and our identity as Eastern Band Cherokee people. So that's kind of where we've been having to flip our switch in our brains, because like I said earlier, assimilation was very prevalent and a part of the game for Eastern Band Cherokee people and it played a role in our sovereignty story. And we are able to definitely see how it has helped us and how it has hurt us. And you know, the language, the culture, and all of those things that were lost. Actually, we don't even really say lost. If you think of it from a colonized brain, then you would say, "Man, it's lost. It's gone forever." But an indigenous way to think of it is it's dormant. It's asleep. It's still here. It's still within us. We have to take the initiative to wake it up and to bring it out of its dormancy. And it's just like all of our medicines. You know, we have histories of our medicines, but even with my language, I have to change that around because I grew up mostly in a school system. And I grew up with two parents who, my mother's first language was Dene. My father, he didn't speak. He didn't have, his first language was English. And my mother went through boarding school, and she can only understand the Dene language, and it's hard for her to speak it. But it's still there. It's dormant. So when you think of it in that way, it's still here. And it's just like all of our histories. They're still living entities. They're a part of us, and they're within us. We got to do the work to wake it up. So, Nancy, you got anything to add to that?
So drawing on the narrative that Shennelle has laid before you, let's dig into just a little bit about what you guys have been studying in your classes. So I understand that you guys have been looking at Barbara Duncan's book on living stories of the Cherokee. Specifically, I understand you guys have also been looking at the daughter's or the son's daughter story or history. Flip that switch to an oral history. And the reason why we are consciously making that change from a story to an oral history is because when we think about histories themselves, they come from deep within. They come from our generations of knowledge that is being passed down from one person to the next. So when I talk about going out and giving presentations like this, I always like to reflect back on those that gave me the gift of storytelling, gave me that gift of my own histories. And like Shennelle had mentioned, each one of you guys have a history too. How many of you have actually stopped and dug back into your lineage? How many of you look back at your own family? Where did they originally come from? What kind of family histories do you carry with you? Because if you stop and think about it, we can look at this a lot of different ways. And believe me, I can go down a lot of different rabbit holes too when I talk about this. But when you think about it, for each one of us, when we come from someone, we come from our mothers. And it's kind of interesting to know that our cells, every cell in our body carries that memory. And if you think about it, I have 3 children, 3 grown children. Each time I carried my child within my own womb, or when my mother carried me within her womb, or her mother, my grandmother, carried her within her womb, and we were developing, those cells carried that history, that memory of everything that the person before us, our mothers before us, had experienced. So when you look at these stories or histories, that is exactly what it is. It's a history. It's a memory that has been handed down from one generation to the next to the next. The Cherokee, as well as other Native American tribes, taught their children the same way that we did, through our histories, through our stories, through our legends. Within each story, there are life lessons. You just have to know to read between the lines. So from the story that you guys studied in Barbara Duncan's book, you're going to find that exact same story written many times over in a lot of other books. The same story was written in James Moody's book. The same story was written by our Cherokee Nation brothers and sisters and the Cherokee Earth Dwellers. So you're going to find that story or that legend, that history written multiple times. But each time it's written, it's changed just a little bit. I had many mentors growing up. The earliest mentor that I can remember was my grandfather. He only spoke Cherokee. However, my father, who was also a storyteller, was never taught the Cherokee language because his parents were survivors of the boarding schools. We talk about colonization. The U.S. government did do a tragedy against us. They wanted to erase us as Native people. They wanted to assimilate us into their culture. They wanted to erase everything about us that was Native. And they knew the one way to do that was to take away our language. So just like Shennelle had said that the language was never lost, it was just dormant for a period of time. But now, today, you have heard both Shennelle and myself speak our language. At one time, we couldn't do that. At one time, our great-grandparents and our grandparents were punished if they were heard to be speaking the Cherokee language. For me today, I do not consider myself a fluent Cherokee speaker because I am not. It takes lifetimes to learn our language. Our language is one of the more difficult languages to learn. But even with that being said, I still strive every day to speak my Cherokee language. I still strive every day to learn more and more of my history. And we need our language to be able to also know our history, just like you do. When it comes to the story of the son's daughter, it doesn't matter who's telling the story or what version you're reading in what book. The main characters always stay the same. But there'll be little versions that vary based on who's telling the story. So when I actively sought out to follow in my father's footsteps as a storyteller, it's kind of interesting that he brought a box to me. This box was packed full of books, pages, papers, even scraps of a napkin. And it was how he retained these stories all through his years as a storyteller. As I started digging into that box and opening some of the books, the pages were literally falling apart. But on each page was a different story, a different legend that he had wrote down so that he could remember it and retain it. As I flipped through the pages and they started falling apart in my hand, I realized this was my history. And if I didn't do something to save it, it would be lost forever. So in the meantime, I know you guys were all asked to put all your media devices away, your laptops, your phones, things of that nature. That was the first thing I grabbed. I grabbed my laptop and I started reading each little scrap of paper that he had in that book. And I started dictating it into my laptop because I wanted a way to retain and keep those for my grandchildren and their grandchildren and their grandchildren down the line, so that when they hear this story that is being spoken, that they can trace it back and know where these histories came from. So that was very vital for me as a Cherokee woman to be able to hold on to that history just a little bit longer. When I talk about the different versions of the story that you guys have been studying, Kathy Littlejohn, when she tells this story, she changes it up a little bit. So let's talk about the main characters. We know in the story itself that there's the celestial beings. And those are the ones that remain constant within that oral history. Of course, it's the sun, the sun's daughter, and the moon, right? All three celestial beings that reside in the sky vault. And then there's us as the Cherokee people, you included, all human beings, all people. Doesn't matter what race, doesn't matter what nationality you are, you can still take this oral history and learn from it. So we are constant in this story. But where it changes up by the different storytellers that are presenting this, changes up with a little bit of details. So in Kathy's story, she refers to who she or who the Cherokee people go to for help as the little people. She calls them the little people. In Barbara Duncan's story, Freeman Owl, who is also a very well-known storyteller from Cherokee, in his version, the Cherokee people seek help from the conjurers or the medicine people. So as I've been reviewing that story, each one of us as storytellers will come up with our own way of telling the story. We will come up with our own little version, but we always make sure that the main characters remain the same. And if we change any details, we try to change it in a way that it still follows that story itself. I haven't figured my way out just yet. But I do like the way my father told the story, because he broke the story up. So if you look at Kathy Littlejohn's version, she repeatedly says that they seek help from the little people. The little people were known to be travelers. They were able to easily pass from one parallel world to the next. So they were easily able to pass through those portals. They were the perfect person. They were the perfect group of people to seek out help from, because they not only had the knowledge of here on Middle Earth, they had the knowledge of the sky world. They also had the knowledge of the underworld. And in the story, you can recall when they go to the ghost world and they see the ghost dance, right? Does everybody remember that part of the story? I see a few heads out there nodding. Some heads are asleep. So if you're asleep, wake up, guys. Come on. But seriously, that was why they chose the little people in her version to go to. In Freeman's version and Barbara Duncan, they repeatedly talk about the conjurers. Now, we know a difference between a conjurer and the medicine people. In our medicine people, there's always a balance, regardless of what world we're talking about. We have to stay in harmony with everything around us. When it comes to medicine people, we have two distinctions. One, the conjurers who choose to do the dark medicine, and then the medicine people who choose to focus on the beneficial or the good medicine, if you will. In my dad's version, he used both realms. So the first time that the Cherokee people seek out to retaliate against the sun, they went to their own Cherokee medicine people. And that's when they were first introduced to the two snakes that go up and try to kill the sun, but instead they miss. They failed in their quest. So they came back. The second time the Cherokee people in my father's version of this story went out, that is when they chose to go to the conjurers of our medicine people. That is when they took the two strongest warriors of the Cherokee people and changed them into the copperhead and the rattlesnake. How many of us here today are scared of snakes in general? I'll be the first one to raise my hand, because yes, I am. When you're looking at the copperhead versus the rattlesnake, which one are you more scared of, the copperhead or the rattlesnake? I'm scared of the rattlesnake. I shy away from the copperhead. If I see a copperhead, I know for one thing, because of my oral histories, that snake is just as scared of me as I am of it. Leave it alone, and it won't bother you. Same thing with the rattlesnake. Now, out of those two, which two are more deadly, if you think about it? The copperhead or the rattlesnake? The rattlesnake, to me, is more deadly. A strike from a rattlesnake can paralyze you and kill you, potentially. You can survive a rattlesnake bite. But at one time, our animals were known to carry much more strong medicine. So a long time ago in this version of this history, both snakes were of equal deadliness, the copperhead and the rattlesnake. In my father's version, when both the copperhead and the rattlesnake go to kill the sun, the copperhead struck first. But who did it strike? Did it strike the sun? No. It struck the son's daughter, killed her instantly. The snake immediately, the copperhead immediately knew that he had made the gravest mistake possible. When he came back, he vowed he would never kill again. So if you get bit by a copperhead today, yes, you will get sick, but you will not die, because of that vow that the copperhead had made all those many, many, many generations ago when this oral history first came about. So that's why the copperhead will not kill, but the rattlesnake will. When they realized that the mistake had been done and the son came back and she saw her daughter and she went into the daughter's home, she grieved. In Cherokee and most native belief systems, most native cultures, when we grieve, we don't grieve for just a few days. You stop and think about it nowadays. Before COVID, most funeral traditions were to hold a wake and stay up with your loved one for multiple nights. Since COVID, we don't do that anymore. Maybe 24 hours, maybe you get buried the same day. Depends on your cultural beliefs. For most natives, we don't grieve in just a few days. Most native cultures, they have a grieving process of over a year. Just because someone passes beyond this form does not mean that we forget them. We hold those ties deep within. So for the son to go inside and grieve her daughter, that was very devastating to the people in general, because then the world became dark again and cold. They weren't so much afraid of the sun at that point. She was no longer causing fevers. She was no longer causing crops to fail. She was no longer scorching the earth She was no longer killing people with the heat and the intensity of her sun rays, like in the story. But the world was still out of balance. We still did not have that harmony. The Cherokee people realized early on that we had to restore that balance for things to survive, for us as people to continue to survive. We needed the sun, and we needed her rays. We needed her heat. We needed the nourishment from her specifically. So they had to come up with a way to coax her out. Who did they turn to then? In my father's version, they turned to the little people. In my father's version, the reason they went to the little people is exactly what I've already explained, because they had the capability to move easily between parallels. And they had the knowledge. What do we do now? And they explained to the Cherokee people that you needed to take 7 warriors and go deep within the underworld, find the ghost dance, because the sun's daughter would be there dancing. But as you go, take 7 wands of wood, 7 sticks. And what the sticks were made of was very important to the Cherokee people. Do you guys recall what that wood was in the story? Sourwood, exactly. Sourwood is one of our sacred woods. We use it in a lot of our ceremonies even today. It's one of our healers. We use it in medicine. You can do a lot with sourwood. We use it as our pipe stems. We can even use it to weave baskets if we choose to, but a sourwood basket is very rare to see. When they are done for very specific reasons, and they are used for very specific ceremonies, which is important even today to the Cherokee people. So the little people instructed the Cherokees to get 7 warriors with 7 sticks of sourwood and go deep to within the ghost world and find her as she's dancing. And every time she passes, one of the warriors was to reach out and tap her with the sourwood stick. That had to occur 7 times before they could actually take her from the ghost world. They were also instructed, and this is where the details will vary just a little bit depending on who is telling the story. I've seen it written where they put her in a basket. I've seen it written where, and in my father's version, it wasn't a basket, it was a box fashioned out of sourwood. So because that's a medicine, she was gently placed within that box. The lid was fastened down, and the warriors had to carry her back to the Cherokee people, to their own home. They couldn't remain within the ghost world, or they too would lose their life. And it took them days upon days upon days to travel. But at that point, with no sun, how would you measure time? You stop and think about it. The sun rises where? In the east, travels across the sky vault, stopping at noontime, very top, most highest point within the sky vault to visit with her daughter, and then move on and setting in the west. That would count as 1 day. But remember, the sun is grieving. How do they know? How do they measure time at that point? Was that a thought when you were hearing about the story that even occurred to you? This is what I mean when you have to read between the lines in our legends, in our oral histories, because that's very significant and it does have a meaning. But they had to travel to get back to the land of their own. During this journey to get back, the sun's daughter woke up And she starts saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm hungry. I have been gone so long. I'm so hungry. Can you please just open the lid a little bit? Give me some food." And they ignored her. They kept walking. After a while, she said, "Okay, that didn't work. Now I'm thirsty. Please give me water. Please give me something to drink." And they ignored her. They continued to walk. That didn't work. So right before they were ready to as they were traveling to get back home, where they were able to release her, she said, "I can't breathe. Please open the lid just a little bit." And they thought, well, we can't kill her again. It will defeat our mission. It would defeat the purpose for us going to retrieve her from the ghost world. Maybe we need to open the lid just a little bit. Does this story sound a little familiar to maybe Greek mythology? Pandora's box, if you will? Do you open the lid? Do you leave it closed? Are you successful with your mission? Or do you kill her again? Life dilemma. What would you choose to do if you were one of the warriors? One of the most sympathetic warriors thought, well, we can't kill her again. Let's open the box just slightly to where we can let some fresh air in so she won't die. She won't smother. And they did exactly that. And as soon as they opened that lid, just the slightest little bit, they saw a flash of red come flying out. But it's so quick and so fast that they could not do anything about it. They quickly shut the lid again, and they fastened it even tighter, and they kept going on their journey. When they got home, in front of the medicine people again, they were ready to open the lid and release the son's daughter. They got there. When the lid was open, she was not there. The Cherokee history talks of the red bird. Remember that flash of red light that came out? The Cherokee believe that the red bird is representative of the daughter of the sun. We also believe that when we see a red bird come and alight in your yard, or if you see it on a branch and it sings to you, that's a message from one of our ancestors. That's one of our relatives that have come back to visit with us. Listen to their story. Listen to their song. They have something to tell you. So we revere the red bird. They are symbolic to us. They represent every relative we have ever loved and we have ever lost. But if you stop and think about it, what's the life lesson within this story? If you go back to the very beginning, when the sun, why does she get mad in this story? What upsets her to the point that she has to, that we as Cherokee people felt her wrath at that time? What's the first thing that you do when you go to look at the sun? What do? You squint or you cover your eyes. If you're driving down the road, do you remember to reach up and pull that visor down? I don't. That's the first thing I do. My hand comes up and it blocks that sun so I can see. Well, she was upset and angry because every time the Cherokee people looked up at her, they'd squint their eyes and they'd screw their face up. And then these beautiful people would become ugly. And she thought they were making fun of her. Well, she was explaining this, trying to understand and realize what is the problem. She was telling the moon. And the moon said, they don't do that to me. When they look up at the night sky, they see my brilliance. They choose to sit out in the moonlight. They adore me. They look at everything around me. They're pleasant. They don't screw their faces up. Instantly, the sun became jealous. So you can see how easily that balance and harmony is no more. What other life lesson can you get from that one story? Anybody? Yes.
Maybe that, once a loved one is gone, you have to let them go in some way.
You do.
And, come to terms with the fact that they're in a different world now.
Exactly. And that comes with different belief systems across the world, not just Native people. If you stop and look at a lot of different cultures across the world, they also believe the same thing. We are energy. We transition from one life to the next. Are our loved ones really gone? Will they ever truly be gone? Not as long as you remember them. Not as long as you continue to tell their story. Their history. Exactly. That's just one story that you guys have been studying in your college days here. Treasure those days. Learn as much as you can. It's vital. It's important. And it will help you guide you through life. And that is how we taught our children growing up, was through our oral histories. What do you think? Good story? New way? A new way to look at that?
I want to add to that.
Please do.
I was just thinking as you were telling that story, that's one of my favorite stories. First of all, because it talks about a female. There's a lot of our histories that don't talk about females. And the medicine, right? You can have one person perspective and say, oh, that female son was a demon, and demonize it. But when you think about it, it's a part of her medicine. It makes her a person, personification, right? And it makes her relatable. And so that was one of the most powerful stories. But I'm a biology major. And what I heard when Nancy was sharing this was, I heard a lot of balance, positive and negative energy, which exists in each one of our cells and our DNA. And that balance of energies, whether it's within our own human beingness, within our bodies, our biological bodies, but also the balance of the beings, the other beings within the story. The sun and the moon, they're opposites of each other. Neither are positive or negative. I mean, you can maybe see that it could be, like maybe the sun is too hot. Like, oh, that's a negative, right? But you get life from the sun. Without the sun, we wouldn't be able to be here. There would be no life, right? So that's a positive, right? And so, like, when you're thinking about all that balance, that's, to me, that's astronomy. So we're dipping into the sciences here within this history. We're dipping into humanities with relationship, right? And it's all a piece of just that one, like we could be sitting on the back porch and sitting by the river and telling each other these things. And at the moment, it's just like a entertaining history, oral history. But what do you take from it? What can you learn from it? How can you apply it to your life? And it's touching all of these different schools of thought, all of these subject matters, and how they're all connected, and how we're connected, right? During that moment, like we're like, oh yeah. And every time I hear a different history, whether it's the same person telling it, or a different person telling the same story, I get something different from it. I learn something different from it. Not only is it from the perspective of the individual who's telling it, maybe they emphasize a word differently. Or maybe it's also where I'm at in my life. I am now 40 years old. I was literally thinking about this walking up to here, and I was like, oh man, college, that was fun. And I was like thinking like, man, 20 years ago, I was in college. I was 20 years ago, and I didn't think about myself at 40 then. And walking back onto a campus and talking to 20-year-olds, you don't ever know where you're going to be 20 years from now, and how your life what you could like experience during that 20 years. And when you hear a story like that, and how you hear it differently because of the experiences that you have lived that far, right? And I hear it differently than I did when I was 20. When I was 20, I probably would have been in the back with my hoodie, with my earphone in, well, my CD, my Discman, and my headphone in, like, when's this over? I'm hungry, So you hear it differently. And I was just talking to Leslie earlier. Last year, this time, I was in the hospital. And I was getting plasma therapy because I just woke up from a nap at the end of March, and I couldn't walk. I was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré, an autoimmune disease that just happened overnight, it felt like. Actually, it wasn't even overnight. I took a nap after work, and I felt like I was on a boat. And then in the next 2 weeks, it progressively got worse. And so I was in my second day of plasma therapy treatment. My grandma had to pick me up and wheelchair me into the hospital. For 5 days straight, I had to do that. And by the 5th day, I could stand up and I was able to walk again. I walked out of there. And so a year ago, so that's different to me. That story hits different to me because I'm actually here, sitting in this chair, strong again, being able to be in front of you guys and speak to that story. I think I missed this last year because of that, right? And like to speak to that experience, like how does it affect me differently today than it did even last year, even last week? And it's powerful. The medicine that's within it and the medicine that's within you are interacting together. And that's how we all achieve tohi. We call it tohi in Cherokee. That means balance, or like moving to the center almost. And whenever there's a couple different definitions of tohi. And tohi, it says balance or calm, I think is the other one. And then the third one is my favorite that I think on a lot, is how the water moves. So if you go to Cherokee, we have the river, the Okonalufti, which was made by the Uktena, which we call it long person. You might hear some people talk about long man, but it's long person in our language. We don't have feminine, masculine. It's not, our language isn't like Spanish, right? So we call it a long person because that's an entity, that's a being. It nourishes us. And so when you watch that long person and how it flows, we're supposed to be like that river. We're supposed to be like that long person, consistent. And I talk about this a lot because it really speaks to what we've been through in Western North Carolina here lately. When that river, that long person, gets too fast and too much and too powerful, just like that, just like my emphasis on the P in that word right then, it can wreak havoc, right? It can destroy. I mean, it made the Grand Canyon. You think about those things, and so that means it's out of balance. It's out of tohi. It's not in balance. Same way if it gets too low and there's not enough and it doesn't run, it's not healthy. It's too low and it's drying up. That's out of balance. But we, as Cherokee people, that word tohi doesn't just mean peace or balance. It means consistent. It means reaching that peacefulness, that center, and it's consistent. And that's how when the water flows like that on a healthy, when Long Person is healthy, that's how we're supposed to live our lives. And that's how we understand just that one little tiny 2-syllable word, tohi, means all of that. And that's the power of our language. And when we know it, and when we hear these histories, and we can take it in our beings and absorb it, how it changes us and our perspective, and how we live, how we treat each other, how we treat our loved ones, how we see the relationship between the snake, like that, and how we treat the snakes when we see them. It's especially Western North Carolina animals. I try to speak to them in Cherokee because that's their first language too. Like, Wena, Yona, go away, bear. Or I'll just say hi, and I'm not here to bother you. I'm just passing through. I know this is your world right now. This is your world is down here. Copperhead, rattlesnake, Inada. This is your world. I'm just passing through. So please give me that permission. I'm not here to hurt you, right? That's how we're supposed to exist in this place. So it's very, very. I got all of those things from that history, and yours might be the same. Yours might be different. You might get more, or you might even 20 years from now get something else when you think about today. And you're like, oh, that's what they were talking about. That's how powerful oral history is. And I love that you talked about how different ones will explain it in different ways. That speaks to their life experience, how they change it. You all know you have your friends who over-exaggerate when they're telling stories, right? Oh, that person was this tall, or I caught a fish this big, right? But it was really that big. But, all of those things, that's a part of just relating and sometimes teasing each other. I was 16, and there's a man in our community, his name was Bill Reed. And he lived up Soco in Wolftown, and with his wife, and they were both fluent speakers. And I went to a Wolftown Community Club meeting because my dad was like, let's go to this meeting. I grew up in Wolftown, and we went there, and he started talking Cherokee because there was some issue, and he was really scolding everybody, and he could only say what he really meant through the language, and I could just tell he was really mad. And I was like, ooh, he's scary. And he was like a big guy, and he played stickball and been through some rough stuff in his life. But afterward, I ended up sitting by his wife unknowingly because I was just young. And as we were sitting there, and as the meeting was coming to a close, she's like, who are you? She's asking me, and I started talking to her. And then he came, and he sat down, and then for some reason, we just started talking, and he started telling me about stories and history. And he said, there are 4 ways. He said, there's 4 categories of oral histories. He said, there's premonitions, there's prophecies. There's the histories that tell about what's going to happen or what has happened, and what we learned from it and how we can do better the next time because it could happen again, right? Those prophecy stories, histories. Then there are those lessons, those lesson histories, those morality teaches you morals. And you, whenever you have children, I don't have kids, but I have a niece and a nephew. Whenever they get older, I'm probably going to be one of those aunties that's just tell a story to teach them. Like, you learn what you learn from that story. I'm not gonna be mad at you, but let me tell you this, what happened to Rabbit. Eh? And then you learn from Rabbit. Don't learn from me, learn from Rabbit. Those are those morality stories, right? And that way it doesn't make those little ones feel like, oh, I'm in trouble, or they're scolding me, or they might listen better. They might sit down and really listen to you, because you're not telling them that they did something wrong. You're telling them that, hey, this is what Rabbit learned from making this decision, right? And it's up to you what decision you make. So then there's those morality stories, and there's entertainment stories. The funny ones, the ones that we just love to entertain each other with and laugh about. And then the other one, I think, are medicine stories that he talked about, and he told me, I never knew those, there were different categories, but for some reason that day he shared that with me, and from then on until he passed, he was one of my favorite people. And I would see him. I saw him at the mall once, and he was telling me a prophecy story, a dream that he had about me one day playing basketball somewhere in college, and that was cool because that did happen. And so it's really cool to think back upon those little. They're not coincidences. They have purpose. Whenever you meet people like that and have those exchanges of energies. I know are we at time? Questions. Yes, let's do that. Let's do some questions. Is there a microphone that's floating around? I know we have one. It looks like we have one back there. There's a microphone right here. I see a hand back there.
Hello. Oh, that's loud. Oh my God.
I know, right?
Yeah, I'm like, okay. So when you were talking about tohi, that made me think of the bird tohi. And I'm just curious, because I know that is, they're named after the sound they make, but do you draw any, connections between those things?
Between the bird tohi and the word tohi? I don't. I mean, but maybe there's something there that I don't know about. That's something that I'm going to have to ask about, right? I don't know if, Nancy, you can speak on more of that from your experience.
I don't personally know of a connection between the bird tohi and the Cherokee word, but I have to pretty much agree with everything that Shennelle had said on the meaning behind the word, the Cherokee word tohi. You have to understand and realize the Cherokee language, like she said, it's not like any other language in the world. From those two syllables, we draw a lot of knowledge and understanding from just two syllables. So just by saying that word tohi, the tohi to her and to myself, we know it as that balance, that center. So when we talk about balance, you have things that are out of balance, and you always have to come back into that balance. But when she was talking about the flow of water, it's not just that one-time success rate of getting to your balance. You have to stay there consistently. So you guys know the scientific word homeostasis. You know, that when you're out of homeostasis, you open your body up, whether it's physically, mentally, or even spiritually, to allow negativity to come in and cause your tohi to be flipped or unbalanced. And with that opening up, we can introduce negative things into our life, and they can take on their own personas. It can be converted within our body to a disease, like she spoke of last year, not being able to walk. There's a lot of us that suffer from generational trauma. And that may manifest itself into a mental disorder, whether it's anxiety, whether it's PTSD, whether it's anything. So you can see how just that one simple word for us, when we translate it into an English knowledge, means so much more to us as a people. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but it does give a little bit more insight into the Cherokee language and that one word specifically. We had another question in the back.
I did want
Thank
to
you.
ask, though, that name of that bird, is that a Western North Carolina bird?
Yes.
So there's probably meaning that we don't know. If it's a bird that is here, then I would look into who named it, where did that name come from, and like almost like the origin of that specific species. And then also I do want to say we're not fluent speakers, so those syllables break down into something else even. And I can't speak on that, but I will look into it now. And I also want to look into what that bird is and where
and
it's
who
at.
originally named
Yeah,
it.
who named it?
Yeah.
Because they could have pulled it from a Cherokee word.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Then the next question in the back.
we can hear you, but not on the microphone. There you go. It's on.
Ask it like this. I had a question about the four forms of storytelling you mentioned. You said prophecies and lessons and entertainment and medicine. You gave examples of the first three, but I am wondering how you interpreted what you meant by medicine.
Oh,
What we mean by medicine. Well, there's a lot of our oral histories that speak specifically on medicine, and there are other stories, written stories, that I would encourage each and every one of you guys to find and seek out. And don't just look at it from one source. Look at it from different sources, because like I said, every storyteller is going to change it a little bit. So if you actually, and that was one of the stories that if we'd had time, I would have loved to have talked about. I've talked about it before in the past. And that's the story of the origin of disease and medicine. So, which also plays right back into the first question in Tohi, because with every, you think about it in that legend, that oral history, it talks about how the natural world was out of balance. It was out of balance with the Cherokee people. The Cherokee people had become very irresponsible. And we started, you can actually look at it as to practices that are being done today. How many of us actually have to go out and hunt for our food anymore? When we think about hunting, we think about hunting at the grocery store. What am I going to pick up for supper tonight, right? Or we're hunting for a restaurant at 9 or 10 o'clock at night that's still open. So those hunting practices have changed over the years. Long time ago, when that story first originated, hunting was considered differently. We hunted for nutrition, for sustenance, and we have always been meat eaters. We have always been plant eaters. We need that medicine from those sources. So the Cherokee people started hunting for sport and not out of necessity. And when it come to that, the animals got very upset with us, and they wanted to enact war against us to pay us back for what we were doing to them. And in the meantime, our plant friends, they actually spoke up for people, and they said, well, we're not going to allow this, because each one of the animals wanted to introduce disease into the world. That's where it started from. But the plants stood up and they said, well, for every disease that you bring upon the world, we're going to be that medicine. We're going to be that cure. And if you think about it today, and this is kind of interesting that it comes from my background because I'm a retired paramedic. So I've had the experience from both sides. I've had the experience from a colonized mindset in thinking that pharmaceuticals is the best medicine. Maybe not. Synthetic pharmaceuticals are never the answer, in my opinion. But that's because I look at it from two different worlds. When we're talking about medicine, if I want medicine, where's the first place I'm going to go look? Well, if I'm thinking on a colonized mind, I'm going to go straight to the hospital, or I'm going to go straight to the nearest CVS or Rite Aid or pharmacy or whatever and buy Tylenol, Motrin, antibiotics if I have an infection. That's the first thing I look at. You got to stop and think about, where does that come from? If it is a natural medicine, aspirin, where does aspirin come from? The willow tree. So every medicine that is out there that is an answer to a disease, you can research it and find it in the natural world. So for me, my pharmacy isn't CVS or Rite Aid or Walmart or whatever big box store you want to call it. My medicine is, my pharmacy is my backyard. More and more people are now looking into herbal medicines. They're looking more into metaphysiological type aids. But if you stop and think about it, and I know we're starting to run out of time, but I do want to point this out. How many of you guys have ever had poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac of some sort? Did you ever stop to think about, well, where did I pick this up at? Maybe I was walking through from one trail to the next. I wanted to take a shortcut from this hall to the next hall or make it to my next class, and I walked through an area that wasn't a paved pathway, and that poison brushed up against my leg. Well, by night, you're going to be standing there itching. Did you ever stop to think, well, where did I get that poison from? Because I guarantee, as a Cherokee person, if you'd stopped and looked around, you would have found another plant that would have healed you from that poison. How many of you guys know what jewelweed is? The Cherokee people, we call it touch me not. Why do we call it touch me not? Because it's very distinctive. It has these little pods that grow. And as soon as you see that little green pod that's sticking out and you go to touch it, the moment you touch it, it bursts. And it sends its seeds, sprays them out as far as they can fly. And then they land to create a new jewelweed. To us, we call it touch me not. Touch me not, you pull the stalk, you break it apart, it has this ooey gooiness inside. You want that ooey gooiness. You want to rub that directly on wherever that rash is, because it will instantly stop the itch and it will help to dry up the blisters. So next time when you're thinking about medicine, and we speak of medicine, this I can talk about. There's lots of our ceremonies and our medicine. We may mention it, but we're never going to tell you everything that we know. It's unfortunate. There's some things that we keep very sacred to us, and we will never speak of them openly. But I can talk about jewelweed, because it's written about many, many times out there. It doesn't just come from us. We have given that information. Other Native American tribes have given medicine information out into the world, and you can find it today. I know on TikTok, there's a very big, thick book that you can get right now, if you can find it while it's on sale.
Before it's shut down on Saturday.
Right. Of a lot of home remedies that a lot of people are talking about right now. You stop and think about, where did that come from? Where did that knowledge come from? It can be traced directly back to a native indigenous tribe that has shared those oral histories with the world.
I know that it's 12:15. I know some of you are needing to leave. Please feel free to go ahead and leave if you have to go somewhere. We don't want to hold you up. If you don't have to go anywhere, we'll be here and we can still have conversations. But thank you for, I know I'm doing Leslie's job right now, just dismissing people. But thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Go learn something. Make good decisions, as my mom would say.